All right, let's talk about money, something we all use every single day, right? But what if I told you its origin story, the one we all learned, is completely wrong? Today, we're going to peel back that myth of barter and get into the real deal, the incredible record-keeping economies of ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. So let's just start right there. What even is money? I mean, really think about it. Is it the cash in your pocket, the number you see on your banking app, a gold coin? It feels like such a simple question, but trust me, the real answer is one of history's most amazing stories. Okay, so the story that we all know, the one they probably taught you in school, it always kicks off with barter. You know the drill, right? A farmer has a bunch of chickens, a baker has a bunch of bread, and they need to trade. Money in this tale just pops up as this handy invention to make swapping stuff easier. It's neat, it's tidy, and it makes a ton of sense. Or does it? Well, here's where it gets really interesting. That whole barter story, as logical as it sounds, it's pretty much a myth. There's just no real historical or archaeological evidence for it. The actual record tells a completely different and way more fascinating story. So let's dive right in and bust this money myth we all believe. So this really changes how we should think about it. The old idea, the commodity theory, says money is a thing that came from barter. But that's the part that's crossed out because it's just not backed by history. The real story, which you can see in the credit and state theories, is that money isn't a thing, it's a system. It's a way to settle up, to clear debts. It's a tool for organizing society, all built around this central institution of settlement. All right, to find the real origin story, we've got to jump in our time machine. We're going way back, long before anyone even thought of minting a coin. We're headed to the very first accounting civilization. That's right, we're talking 5,000 years ago, to ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. These places were what we call record economies. And get this, they were thriving for almost 3,000 years before the first coins ever showed up. They had these incredibly advanced systems for administration and accounting. And what their records tell us is that the idea of value, the language of value, was around long before physical money. So you're probably asking, no coins? Then how on earth did their economy work? Well, it's simple and brilliant. For them, the ledger was the wallet. Okay, check this out. Their entire economy was built around something called the oikos, which is basically the great house. Think of a huge temple or a palace. So this wasn't about markets and trading. Nope, it was all about redistribution. Everybody from farmers to craftsmen would bring what they produced to the temple as a kind of tribute. Then the temple would hand everything back out, food, tools, whatever people needed, based on their role in the community. And how did they keep track of this whole shebang? On these clay tablets. This little tablet was basically the entire community's bank account. Scribes at the temple would meticulously record who gave what and who was owed what. So if you wanted to pay someone, you didn't hand them a thing. You just had the scribe change the record. Payment was literally just a mark on a clay tablet. Mind-blowing, right? Okay, but wait. How do you compare, say, a bunch of wool to a jar of oil or to a day's work? They're totally different things. This is where they got really clever. They invented what you could call imaginary money. They came up with a standard unit, like the shekel of silver. Now, here's the key part. The shekel wasn't a coin they were trading, not at all. It was just an abstract idea, a unit of measurement, so they could figure out the value of everything and keep the books balanced on that letter. Now, for a system like this to work, a system based entirely on records, you need one absolutely critical thing. And that's trust, but probably not in the way you're thinking. See, people didn't have to trust each other. They trusted the institution. They trusted the temple. Why? Well, for three big reasons. One, the temple was always there. It was this permanent, continuous operation. Two, its measurements were stable and fair. Everyone knew what a unit of barley was. And three, its records were the official truth. They could be updated, but they were the final word. That temple ledger was literally the community's collective memory. It's basically the granddaddy of our central banking system today. So that's the big question, right? How do we get from these abstract clay tablets to actual physical coins? How do we go from record to coin? Well, let's hop over to Egypt for a clue. Over there, green was the currency for paying taxes and wages. But think about it. Who wants to lug around giant sacks of grain? Nobody. So instead, officials would just write out these orders on papyrus scrolls. It was like an IOU from the government saying, the person holding this gets X amount of grain from the treasury. and people could just pass that scroll around as payment. It was basically the world's first paper check. It proved that a piece of paper, a record, was just as good as the actual stuff. And this is what leads us to the final step. So, you start with this idea of an offering, a tribute to keep society running smoothly. That evolves into an accounting unit to measure what everyone owes. And then, finally, you get the coin. A coin was invented when a king or a ruler basically took all the trust and authority of that big state ledger and stamped it right onto a little piece of metal. So the coin's value isn't just the metal, it's a portable, physical piece of the ledger. It's a token of credit. So, when you piece all of this history together, you get a totally new and powerful understanding of what money really is. At its heart, money is social bookkeeping. Let's boil it all down to the 3 big takeaways. First, value came way before exchange. We figured out how to measure and account for value before we were all out there trading in a marketplace. Second, settlement is way more important than barter. Money's real job wasn't to swap stuff, it was to settle our debts and obligations to each other and to the community. And third, and this is the big one, money started as credit, not as a commodity. It was always a record, a promise, an entry in a ledger. The physical coin or bill just came later. And that brings us to a really cool final thought. You know those 5,000-year-old clay tablets? They're not just some dusty old artifacts. They are running on the exact same software, the same core idea as the digital banking you do on your phone today. They are the direct, ancient ancestors of our modern financial ledgers. I mean, sure, the technology has changed a little, but the fundamental idea of money as a trusted record, that's been with us for thousands and thousands of years. Everything we've talked about here is based on the really fascinating lecture by Soong K. Yu from the Institute for Political and Economic Alternatives. Thanks so much for joining me.